Hey everyone, let's recover some data today. A customer dropped off a Galaxy S5 where the LCD is no longer functioning, but the phone still turns on, as you can tell by the LED indicator up there. So what we're going to do here is we're going to hook a new screen onto it temporarily so that we can recover the data. Then we'll just reassemble it with this broken screen and transfer the data to the customer's new phone. So without further ado, let's go ahead and just tear right into this one. We're not going to be nice about turning it off. We're just going to pop the battery out. First step I'm going to do is I'm going to unplug the home button connector so that it doesn't rip when I take the screen out there. Just popped open there. Now these, I cannot for the life of me remember if I need to take out the bottom two screws. I'm going to do that just because. Now normally I would treat this phone super duper nice and I would heat it up to open it, but we're just gonna attempt to get that screen up. That screen's not working anyway, so we're not exactly gonna be the nicest about it. I do want to keep it somewhat intact because I am gonna give this back to the customer like this. So I want to make sure that it's at least not in a million pieces more than it already is, but I'm also not going to be nice and worry about the LCD. You can see it shattering as I go along. That is the LCD layer that you see reflecting through the glass. That's also why it doesn't turn on. If you have even the slightest hairline fracture in that, it will no longer display an image on Samsungs. Some phones, depending on what type of screen they have, will actually still display even with LCD damage. For instance, the newer Samsungs actually, despite having an issue with flickering if the OLED is damaged, it will just black out certain spots that are not making connection anymore. Same with the iPhone X and XR, XS, XS Max, etc. Those are all going to have little black spots if the LCD is damaged. Alright, so we're almost up. Like I said, I'm going to try and be a little nice and not completely obliterate this screen. Though at this point, I don't really know what else to tell them. Let me zoom out so you can actually see what I'm doing here. Yep, there it goes. So like I said, heat, if you want to keep the LCD and everything intact when you're removing it, heat is your friend. But in this case, I'm not even going to worry about it. Alright, so as you can see, we've got our home button still attached there. I'm actually going to plug it back in so that I can use it while I'm doing this data backup. And what we have revealed here is our LCD connector right there. And that's what we need to hook on the new combo temporarily. I'm calling it a combo. It's technically an LCD and digitizer combination. We just call them combos for short in the repair industry. So our new one right here has that cable. One of the cool things about this is, though, that it can fold up like so, which will allow us to actually plug this in pretty easily without actually having to install this part. So that's hooked on temporarily. Zoom back out so you can see. Hook on our battery again. And lo and behold, we've got an image. Now I'm going to go over and back it up on the computer, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. So I went to go back it up on the computer, and well, things didn't go exactly to plan. Go to turn it on. No problem so far, but that's very weird. The first time I turned this thing on, it jumped right to the dead battery indicator. Oh, there it goes. All right, so let's charge this one up. We'll back up the data and I'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, we are hitting problem after problem with our S5 today, actually. We've plugged it into our charger and we're currently pulling 0 amps through it because the charge port itself is damaged and probably not going to show up on camera too well right here, but there is a small pin in there missing. It's actually bent to the back of it there. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to hook on a charge port temporarily to this to actually get it to connect. So 1 second, I'll grab that and we'll get that installed. Alright, so we've got our replacement port ready to go, but you'll notice that it's not really accessible at the moment. Our charge port cannot be gotten to easily. So we're going to have to open this phone up a little bit deeper than before and get into that charge port. So we're going to unhook the mid-frame out of it. Thankfully, Samsung uses all the same size screw throughout most of their phones. For example, even the S6, S7, and S8 all use the exact same sized and threaded Phillips head screw. That makes repairs a breeze when reassembling because there's no wrong place to put a screw. There's no risk of long screwing the board. There's no risk of screwing through to the LCD or anything like that. Everything is nice and the same. I can't say otherwise for different manufacturers, certain fruit related brands, but Samsung at least does make it a little easier to take apart their stuff. I think I've got all the screws out of the mid frame. I'm going to go ahead and try and pop it out. Now again, normally I would be treating this phone much nicer with a lot more care on it, but this phone is strictly for harvesting data off of it. It is not going to go back as a working device, nor does it need to. Something is holding it on pretty tight. Nice little clip up there. There we go. Right. So the mid frame actually has the board on it and everything. So now we just have to get to the charge port. Nice and simple. Gonna unplug our antenna connectors. I'm not even gonna replug those in because I don't need cell service on this thing right now. Pop that open. That is the home button connection, if you remember, right there. Zoom in so you can see that a little bit better. But that is actually the home button that we unclipped and reclipped earlier. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to hook the new charge port into the board on the underside of it. It's a little wonky the way that Samsung has their charge ports designed, and unfortunately they went for a new design change on the Galaxy S10 series where it is part of the board itself. There's no longer this little daughter board that it gets plugged into. So that it's kind of a step back as far as things go in the repair industry. Makes it a little bit harder. USB-C connections are nearly impossible to solder on perfectly, so it definitely makes things a little harder. So let's carry on with this repair. We're going to hook the new screen onto the mid frame, onto the board, without actually reassembling much of anything at this point. And let's see, let's power this thing on. Let's see what happens. I've actually had the battery in our jumper charging up, so let me grab that. And I'm just noticing this battery actually has a little bit of damage on it. So that's it's not really a concern so much as it is just something to note. I'm going to plug it back into here. It should have enough to power it on, and I'm actually going to set this up in a way that I can see the screen. make sure it's actually going to power on here. Let's zoom out so you can see the full effect. Hold these 2 pins with something metal, and we've got a phone that's on. Close that screen real quick, grab our charging cable. We're going to plug that charging cable into our new charge port that's been hooked up onto there. And now we have a beautiful Frankenphone built up. I just dropped the battery out of it. Unfortunately, that's part of the risk. Battery and charge port are no longer playing nice together. Interesting. I'm just going to unplug the charge port since that seems to be the last thing that caused it to stop. Make sure our battery is seated in there very well. Going to hold these 2 here. And now I'm not getting any boot. Interesting. Make sure our screen connection is solid. Yes. Battery is solid. Now we're powering on. Excellent. Seems that battery was just a little bit loose without the mid frame on there. And so to hold that in, and grab a spudger and see if it can put some pressure on there to hold that battery in place. Booting up, and while I'm booting up, I'm actually going to plug in that new charge port. Make sure that our battery doesn't go out on us. Perfect. Now I'll get this backed up and we will be right back. Well, I'm back, and unfortunately this video is also going to get cut a little bit short. The customer has provided me with the incorrect passcode to back this up, which means I'm going to essentially have to leave this one as it is, rather than spending all that time and labor reassembling it, and only have to disassemble it to get back in for the backup. So unfortunately I'm going to call the customer and we'll wait to hear back on this one. But thanks for joining me and checking out how you can possibly back up the information off of your Galaxy S5. Thanks, I'll see you next time.